Hello and welcome to another retrospective where I'm going to be looking today at the Commodore Vic 20 conversion of Skramble, which was done by Terminal Software back in 1982-1983. So this was not an official conversion of Skramble for the Vic 20. This was one of many different clones that came out. So this was Skramble with a K, for instance. And this is actually one of the versions which doesn't get a huge amount of kind of spotlight put onto it. I mean, Analog's Skramble gets a lot more attention because it's kind of considered the definitive Vic 20 Skramble clone. But this one will always have like a very sort of close place to my heart because it was the very first conversion I ever played, and it was one of the original games that I first got on my Vic 20 in the bundle of games that I got. So this copy you see here is one that I've had to pick up in recent years, and is a fairly rare version of the Vic 20 game. So most commonly you'll find Skramble in like a clam case terminal software release with a different cover art. So that was something I think they did a bit later on. It was more mass produced, but this one with this particular artwork, very different artwork in sort of yellow border, is fairly uncommon. It's quite hard to find, and I used to kind of dream that this was the inlay, and the reason for that is because I had the game for about probably less than a year and absolutely loved playing it, and then unfortunately I had like someone come round once and I think they stole the game because I could never find it again after that point. So for years I kind of was without this conversion in the game and used to try and track it down. And I used to kind of have this picture in my mind of like a yellow border and red letters of Skramble on the side, and when I eventually kind of found this on eBay, it really just kind of stood out like a sore thumb and made me sort of jump back. So I had to snap it up. I think I paid like £20 or something, a little bit ridiculous for it, but it was kind of worth it just to kind of get that get the game back. But before that, to actually play the game again, I was desperately trying to find the conversion after all these years, and I used to try and say to people I'm looking for the terminal software version of Skramble on the Vic 20 and could never find it. And I had a really good friend called Thomas Moore, who I used to kind of write letters to back in sort of 1996-97, and he was a guy I used to kind of pick up and sell second-hand games, and he had like a massive Vic 20 list, and very kindly he produced this this tape here, and this is like just a load of backups from various different versions. So as I was trying to track this game down, he did every possible copy of Skramble he could find, and on there was the Terminal Software Edition, which I was so happy to finally get hold of. And it's thanks to Tom, who sadly is no longer with us, that I was able to play that game again for quite a few years until I found this this edition of the game again. So the game was written by a chap called Reg Stevens, who's probably around about his late 70s now, and I kind of spoke to him some years back about his game, and originally the game was actually released by Rabbit Software as well in a different incarnation and different graphics, and although it's technically the same game, I just don't like the Rabbit Software version at all. So it's always the Terminal Software version that I've gone back to, and maybe that's because of the rose tinted view that I have sort of playing the game. So I'm just going to go and kick into it. Try and stop talking a little bit. So I'm going to load it from tapes. I think the tape version that I'm going to load from here is actually from one of my backups that I originally made for Vic 20 game base. So I'm just going to kind of find that now. I'll show you the Rabbit Software version as a bit of a comparison afterwards. So here we go. So this is what I would have loaded back in the day. So you have this like Skramble by R.W. Stevens. So he must have written it in 1982 and it wasn't released till 83. I'll just speed it up a little bit and we'll get to the screen here. Here we go. Right. So yeah, this one of the things I'll say, this is an unexpanded Vic 20 game. So usually Vic 20 games would have a memory expansion to kind of cram everything in and get a fairly decent arcade conversion done, but this was all done unexpanded, and I think Reg did an absolutely fantastic job to get most of the game crammed in. It's not 100% accurate arcade conversion of the classic Skramble arcade at all. a lot of it's been changed completely. There's like a flying spider creature in one of the later levels. But it doesn't really matter too much. I mean, it's still a fun little game to play. The only one of the things I'll talk about, one of the limitations I'll talk about as we play it. So let's kick in. So I don't know if it's a... I can't remember what that tune is exactly. I think it's is it Major Morgan? I'm not sure. So it's quite... The only slight problem is that it's got quite a slightly jerky scroll to it. Like a character scroll. Which after a while you get used to, so it's not too bad. Both bombs and shot buttons are done by one button, whereas in the arcade you'd have a button for the bomb and a button for the shot. So Reg has just kind of made it one joystick button to do both. Makes a lot of sense. So I don't know how far I'm going to get with the keyboard controls. I'll try my best. Now, the oil is essentially what was fuel in the arcade game, so now we've got the rockets starting to fly up. And you need to try and hit as many of these as you can, because... There we go. One of the flaws with this conversion, and I don't know if it's actually possible, I've tried using save states, it seems to be that there's not quite enough fuel to get to the end of the game. No matter if you hit everything on the ground, you seem to run out of fuel before you manage to get towards the end of the game. So that means I've never actually seen what's at the end of the game, and if it's similar to the arcade where you have to bomb like a rocket silo at the very end. And I'd love to see what's at the end, so I don't know if anyone knows how to get a cheat for infinite fuel. But please let me know if you know a way how to do that. But yeah, this is one of my favourite games that I used to load up a lot on the Vic, and I just loved it because you were this ship and you could bomb stuff on the ground and you could shoot stuff in the sky, and it was probably one of the most advanced games I had on the Vic at the time, apart from Amiga Race. Amiga Race was another one that I used to play a lot, and that's definitely going to be another retrospective at some point. But yeah, I was very sad when I kind of lost this game and it sort of disappeared randomly, and unfortunately sometimes you have certain people around your house, people can take stuff, and unfortunately that's what happened. I had a couple of old Atari games go as well, VCS games. So here's this weird kind of spider creature that you get in underground caves, which is not in the arcade at all. So here it gets pretty tight. So in a minute the cave's going to sort of go down. Missing those two fuel pods is not going to help at all. So in a second he's going to stop, and we'll get the cave come down. So for an unexpanded game, this is extremely impressive as well. I wasn't blown away that it was an unexpanded game back then, because I didn't really understand too much about what was so good about having an 8K expansion. I thought it was a bit of a pain in the arse at the time, to be honest, because you had to get a working expansion cartridge to play a lot of the stuff, and the one I had was a little bit faulty. But I mean, obviously now I appreciate it a lot more. I mean, this could have easily been an expanded game, you would have probably questioned it. Reg was a bit of a genius, I think, with managing to cram stuff into just the unexpanded Vic. Another game which I'll cover at a later point is Meteor Blaster, which is another quite neat game. Yep. There we go. Right, so that's another flaw as well. You get onto the fireball level and you can't quite see that fireball. You have to kind of move out of the way at the last second. Let's have another go. Now that tune, I'm sure that was used in a cartoon series that I used to watch as a kid, like Major Morgan or something. Major Morgan was that kind of handheld device, but there was like a cartoon where it had stars and stripes in the background. I might have been dreaming it. Okay. One other particular memory I have of this is when I used to play this, the fuel pods, or was it the yellow bullets, or the yellow... It might have been the helicopters actually. The helicopters you could hardly see. It was like a faded out sort of silhouette on my version that I had. And I thought it was possibly something to do with the VIC-20 because I had a couple of games that certain things were faded out. You couldn't quite see it. And it wasn't until much later on that I got like another RF modulator box, because you didn't have the modulator box built into the VIC-20. You had to have like this separate silver box that you plugged into the back and then connected your aerial lead up. It wasn't until like I picked up a spare one second hand and used it and tested it, I realised all the colours sort of came to life on my VIC-20, and then I realised that this RF box that I had for about a year or two was completely faulty and the colours weren't coming out strongly enough. So it meant that I was playing like Skramble for years, not able to see half of see the bullets or the greens of the helicopters at all. Just a random sort of memory there to share with you. But okay, I'll try and concentrate a little bit more. I'm going to see if I can get past that fireball bit. I have once got to the buildings bit, like in the arcade game, and then sort of quickly ran out of fuel, unfortunately. So yeah, I managed to catch up with Reg about 10 years ago now. So I did a blog post on this game when I used to do these Retrobytes blog posts talking about old games. And I managed to kind of track down Reg just by chance on Facebook, and had a good chat with him. So most of these games you sort of write him from home, as most people were back then, and he ended up doing quite a few games for Terminal Software. He did Star Commander on a C64, but he was very fond of the VIC-20. He loved what you could do with it, and yeah, he told us about how originally this came out by Rabbit Software originally. That was the first version, the sort of Skramble 0.1. And then this version that he did for Terminal Software was a more refined edition of the game. But there was like I think there was a hacked version of the Rabbit Software game called Raid Over Islam. And he confirmed that this wasn't official at all. This was some kind of a hack that someone had done. He was quite surprised to see it. But I think he'd done quite a few VIC-20 games. I think there was a card game or something that he'd written, but unfortunately it didn't get to see release. And I was kind of talking with Reg to see if he could maybe dig it out for us to back up and preserve it, but unfortunately Reg sort of disappeared off Facebook. I don't know if he's still around today. So he must have been in his 70s at the time. But it was really quite cool to. It's quite nice sometimes to just talk to your sort of the heroes who created a lot of those memories that you have growing up as a kid. So it was an honour to sort of speak to Reg and sort of tell him how much I loved playing his Scramble game, and I think he appreciated that someone had remembered his game as well for what was essentially just like a hobby. Okay, last chance. The problem is I'm talking too much, and it's one of those games when you're in that cave where you want to really concentrate. Okay, so before it gets into the cave, one of the things I'd say, so I love this game because it's what I grew up with. It's the Scramble game that I grew up playing. So obviously I love it. A lot of people, when I've said to them that this is the best version of Scramble, they've disagreed with me and they've said, oh, the Amrog one's the best. And I mean, that's probably fair enough. Technically, the Amrog game probably is better in many ways. It's probably more accurate as well. But I still think this is a pretty decent conversion, apart from the sort of juttery character scroll. It's but it's hard, isn't it? When you're kind of talking about something you've grown up playing, you always get that rose-tinted sort of glasses view, and you can't really avoid it. So all I can do is just be honest with you and say that's probably the case with me. But I always say to people, try and check stuff out. I mean, I'm hoping that when I do these videos, it kind of gives you something to maybe tweak your interest and sort of get you to dig it out and load it up for yourself. If you're after the Terminal Software version, you can find the tap image within Game-Based VIC-20. And as I say, I think it's one that I backed up originally for the archive. It's either that or Matt Allen's copy, I'm not sure. But this is one of the first things I wanted to get backed up when emulation became a thing. We were sort of backing all our VIC-20 games up because I wanted to make sure I never lost this game again. So yeah, when it originally got stolen, it was quite a few years until I actually got to play it again. It was not until probably about 96, 97 when Tom very kindly did that copy and I finally saw it again. Right, here we go. Let's try and concentrate a bit. So I need to watch that fireball. Ah, exact same place. Okay, I'm not going to be able to do it. Right, so that is Skramble on the VIC-20. If you haven't played this particular conversion before, then I highly recommend checking it out. The C64 version is pretty good as well. Again, it's not accurate. It's also written by Reg, but it has a proper decent smooth scroll on it in comparison to the VIC version. Yeah, it's one of those games that just invokes so many very fond memories of when I got my VIC-20, and I think the reason when it got stolen and I didn't have it for those amount of years, that kind of made me like desperate to play it more, and I think that's why it's stuck in my memory more as well, is because it got stolen and it took some years to pick it up again. But I was really chuffed to kind of pick up this version again and put it back into my collection. Not because it's like potentially worth any money or it's rare or anything like that. It's just more for the kind of personal connection to it, the kind of the memories that it invokes and the connection from my childhood that it has. And yeah, definitely worth checking out if you get a chance. So right, I hope you enjoyed this retrospective, and I'll see you next time.